have chosen the academics about rituals. The word rituals is from the traditional Gurukula academics point of view is a highly objectionable word because they consider ritual to be something which is done routinely as a ritual. It's a popular usage of the word, and they think that the word karma or kratu or yajna, these words carry more deeper ideas than just ritual. So they don't like the word ritual as a translation. But let me tell you that here, for the purpose of academic research, we are using the word ritual as a word that communicates all the things that the word karma, kratu, or yajna, yaga, all these things communicate also. So, with that clarification, uh, let me tell you that I've taken the task of handling four different things. One is how, from a traditional point of view, from a Vaidika point of view, ritual has been studied as a Shastra. Second, to expand the scope of ritual, Indic ritual particularly, beyond the Vaidika ritual. Three, to talk about how Indologists of the West and Indologists from India have been doing a lot of academics about rituals. And four, how we can go forward using all this material that is already available from all these three perspectives. First, to start with, for the benefit of all the youngsters that are sitting here, let me share a few basic points that from the Vaidika point of view, from the Vedic tradition, at the time of the Vedas being revealed itself, Vedas coming out in the very early stage itself, the Vedas, the textual material of the Vedas cannot be assumed to have come into existence in vacuum. So all the studies of Vedic texts purely from textual point of view, purely from the words, purely from the verbal content of the Vedic texts have been misplaced mostly because they have neglected the context. Two, they have also neglected the point that the context was inherent within the text itself. Three, the Vedic tradition from the text itself, from within the text itself, has always been a self-conscious tradition. Vedic uh, texts, right from the beginning, from the mantras itself, within the mantras itself, there is a self-conscious description of the context of life of Vedic people. And as part of that, repeatedly, the mention of yajna comes as part of mantra itself. And then you go to Brahmanas and Aranyakas. These are the texts which are the self-conscious portion of the Vedic text, and they have been repeatedly talking about the yajna and the ritual context. So to purely talk about Vedic texts as though they are not at all in any Vedic life context, but particularly in the ritual context, in the yajna context, is a highly misplaced way of studying Vedic texts. So, what is very important uh, from the Vedic academics point of view, from a traditional point of view, that needs to be known by the modern audience, particularly the youngsters that are attending this seminar, is that the methodology of studying Vedic rituals has been laid down by the Vedic texts themselves. And it started from the mantras and the Brahmanas and the Aranyakas. Uh, they have already laid down the methodology of not only performing the ritual, they have also laid down the methodology of analyzing the ritual. On both sides they have done that. And this gradually, by the time of Vedangas, this has been articulated. For example, in Nirukta, the word meanings have been uh, at five different levels. And one of them is Adhiyajna level of interpretation of the meanings. So that Adhiyajna level of meaning of the words itself in Nirukta shows that the Yajna consciousness of the interpretation of the words of the mantras was already there by the time of Yaska. And Yaska is not saying that he is the first one to do that. He is saying that he is just following the tradition from others. So there has been a long tradition of looking at the Vedic texts and mantras from Yajna perspective by the time of Nirukta itself. And then you have a full Anga, one of the six Angas, Vedangas, devoted completely for the performance of Yajna, the details of performance of Yajna called Kalpa. And from the Kalpa only, what we call Shrauta today, the Shrauta Shastra has evolved, and it is the Kalpa that has got all the details of, for example, Shrauta Sutras, and you have today we talk about Vedic mathematics, and we talk about Pythagoras theorem being known already to the Vedic people. All these details come from these Shrauta details only. How to perform the Yajna Kundas, how to construct, and further geometry only as part of the geometry of construction of various shapes of Yajna Kundas only, and how to change one shape of the Yajna Kunda to the other shape of the Yajna Kunda only. They got the need of doing the geometrical constructions and the theorems and the formulae like Pythagoras theorem and all that. So to that level of meticulousness of construction of kundas and all that, the details of how to perform the yajna were already laid down in Kalpa. So there is no need of going for an external methodology for studying Vedic tradition. From the beginning, in every aspect, Vedic tradition has been a self-conscious tradition. It has been building all the vocabulary that is needed to study the Vedic rituals. For example, many of the youngsters in the audience might not know that the rituals in the Vedic tradition have been classified into Nitya, Naimittika, and Kamya. There is that one classification. And these Nitya karmas, for example, Sandhya Vandanam and such rituals, they are considered to be those rituals which, by not performing, lead to what is called as pratyavaya. That is a bad supernatural effect, an unwanted supernatural effect. But whereas the other ishtis, other yajnas are those which lead to apurva, a wanted, desirable, positive, supernatural benefit from the rituals. And uh, among them, naimittikas are those which are performed when a nimitta happens. Uh, as as a response to the nimitta, naimittika ritual is performed. Whereas the rituals that you see in Ramayana, like Putra Kama Ishti, there you are able to see that you are performing that ritual with a Putra Kama, with the desire of having offsprings. So they are called Kamya kind of rituals. So all these different kinds of rituals, if you see the details of how these yajnas and havanas and homas and all these kinds of rituals are performed, you'd be able to see that the Vedic system of analyzing the rituals itself was conscious that some of the rituals are part of a daily routine of a Vedic person, and some of the rituals are performed for a particular context, for a particular reason, and other rituals are performed for a particular wish. for what they want to achieve from the rituals. And there is another classification of yajnas where you see that the yajnas are classified into Shantika and Paustika rituals. Shantika rituals, we can compare them to medicines that heal, healing rituals. And you can look at Paustika rituals as tonic rituals. They are they give pushti to the nature which is already there. So the Shantika and Paustika classification also shows that the what Sridhar Chariji was mentioning as a repairing nature. Whatever whenever Vedic people perceive that there is a disturbance uh, at three levels: Adi Bhautika, Adi Daivika, and Adhyatmika levels. To As a response to that, Shantika rituals were performed. One very good example for that is in the very beginning of Mahabharata. Janamejaya is shown to be performing a Shantika ritual because there is a Kurukshetra war. The and the Kurukshetra war is a big violence. It has many deaths have happened at a place, and people are not happy with the Ashanti that such a deaths have created. So the Janamejaya is advised to conduct a Shantika ritual. And for that, if you look into the details in Mahabharata, uh, Janamejaya goes in search of Somashvaravasa, the Purohita suited to perform this kind of a ritual. And it shows that these rituals, even Shantika rituals, were performed with such meticulousness, with such details that any all and sundry kind of Purohita is not eligible to do that. And the details to the meticulous level of how to perform a Shantika ritual were already there in the Shastra, and only certain Purohitas like Somashravasa would be able to perform that. And Janamejaya goes in search of him and finds him and gets him and performs that ritual. Only during, as part of that Shantika ritual, only Takshaka instigates him to perform Sarpayaga, and the whole Sarpayaga episode in the Adi Parva comes as part of that only. But Paustika rituals are those which are like tonic. They are performed for nourishing nature. They are performed for example, we talk about yajnas bringing rain, or yajnas fertilizing clouds, and all that. Such rituals are for the pushti of nature. If you look at the Purusha Sukta, you are able to see that Purusha is the cosmic person. The entire cosmos has been described as Purusha there. And the entire cosmic process of creation itself is being described as a yajna. And cosmic person offers himself, tat purushena havisha. It is mentioned in the Purusha Sukta. So the Purusha himself is offering himself into the yajna of the cosmic process. And then how he is recreated. The Purusha is recreated, and it is at that point that the whole creation is being described as the four varnas coming out of the newly created Purusha as part of the different body parts of the Purusha, and all the planets are described and all that. And then it is mentioned in the Purusha Sukta that the this kind of yajna was performed by Devaha, and Tani Dharmani Pradhamanyasan. With that kind of yajna that was performed by the Devas, the other people started following the procedure, and yajnas were created. All the yajnas were created. So, if you understand the cosmic person and the cosmic process and how that was viewed as yajna, you'd be able to realize that the Vedic way of looking at all the yajnas that are performed by human beings is what is called as imitation of how devas perform the yajna, how yajnas have happened in nature itself, how yajnas have happened in the cosmic process itself, that is being imitated by humans through the yajnas that they perform individually. So this kind of analysis of yajna as a cosmic process, as participation in cosmic process, and as a healing process, as a nourishing process, as a tonic process, has already been laid down in the Vedic texts right from the Rigvedic mantras. The Purusha Sukta, for example, is a Rigveda mantra only, though historically they consider that to be from a later part of Rigveda. Nevertheless, it is Rigveda only. And from there, you see that in the Brahmanas and Aranyakas, the whole procedure to perform the rituals and the meaning of rituals, what are the purposes of rituals, everything is laid down very, very clearly. And then you see that the Vedic rituals include sanskaras. All the Shodasha sanskaras, every individual is given sanskaras right from the birth. All the rituals that you see in your own homes, all the youngsters, I'm speaking to the youngsters now, all the functions, they say functions that are performed at the time of birth, the naming ceremonies, feeding, first feeding ceremony, and all that, they're all actually part of the 16 sanskaras, 16 refinements that are given to the individual who is born, and these go on up to the death of the person. The death rituals that people call are part of all these 16 sanskaras, and I'm going to talk about how in anthropology, in cultural anthropology, they talk about what are called as rites of passage, life cycle rituals, and these words like life cycle rituals and rites of passage that are used in cultural anthropology of 19th century, 20th century, these concepts are already there. Shodasha Samskaras were looked at as life cycle rituals only. Most probably, there is a possibility that this idea of life cycle and life cycle rituals, rites of passage, has been a borrowing from uh, the Vedic idea of Shodasha Samskaras only. And these are part of a family ritual. These happen in a family, whereas the yajnas that we were talking about, they happen at a collective scale, in a group fashion, in a community fashion. Community participates in it. And if you look at the household level rituals, a grihastha used to have three kinds of agnis, and those three kinds of Agni rituals, Havana rituals, Dakshinagni, Garhapatyagni, and Ahavani Agni, they were part of a Grihastha's life, and that was part of family level rituals. And at the community level, all these yagas like Ashwamedha Yaga and others that are performed by the king or by other yajamanas for, say, Putrakama or any other ishtis or somayagas and all that, most of these were performed at a community level. So, and these the details of household level rituals and ishtis at the household level, chayana rituals at the household level, the details of how to perform them and how to analyze them and how to connect them to the text of the Vedic mantra, the whole procedure has been evolved into Shastra. That is the Shastra is being called as Mimamsa. Mimamsa, or otherwise what is called as Purva Mimamsa, has laid down the procedures of interpretation of Vedic texts in terms of these rituals. That has led to such a great scope for the Vedic tradition to be able to talk about how uh, a text which does not talk about action is also actually indirectly telling about action. For example, if you study Mimamsa, it tells you that if I'm praising something, I'm actually indirectly instructing that action. If I'm saying that eating a fruit is very good, oh fruit, you are so nice and I praise you. Actually, you are saying, you're indirectly instructing that fruit has to be eaten. But this kind of analysis, this almost sounds common sense, but we never think about this. We never think that praising a particular action or praising a particular object or praising a particular subject content is indirectly instructing an action. This kind of analysis of textual material is all provided inside Mimamsa, and that is what made Mimamsa grow into a science of interpretation of text, which has given to hermeneutics, given rise to hermeneutics of Vedic exegesis that has happened. So we have a huge scope in the self-conscious tradition of the Vedic system, that already so much of material is there. Mimamsa is giving you text to ritual kind of analysis. Kalpa is giving you the performance details already. And you have in all other texts classification of rituals and how to understand these rituals and all that. So, all this material is already there in the Vedic tradition provided. And it went on and on and on. And in the recent times, you have texts like Dharma Sindhu, Nirnaya Sindhu, which have come handy for people to consult. And you have Kala Madhava kind of books which decide when to perform a particular festival, for example, how to decide which festival has to be performed on which tithi and all that. So to that meticulousness of details, the entire tradition of these ritual, ritual analysis, ritual performance, ritual time decision, ritual procedural decisions, and all the complex questions of what happens to the shaucha or ashaucha, and what kind of a shaucha can go into in contradiction to the shaucha that is there in, for example, if there is a mruta shaucha, how does the jata shaucha, that is death related ashaucha, the supernatural impurity, how does it affect the jata shaucha? Or how does jata shaucha, that is the birth born impurity, affect the death born impurity? All such meticulous details have been very in a very detailed and meticulous fashion have been codified in text, and that has given rise to a huge amount of ritual studies in India. And if you youngsters can take time and pay attention and go into all these details, most of these questions that one parent was raising about what is the rationale behind, how to convince the youngsters, how to convince the youngsters about the scientific aspect of these rituals and all that, most of these questions get already answered in all these texts, because they have put their mind into these questions, and they have already answered most of these questions. And there is a huge amount of Vaidika textual material itself that is already available. And some of this can remain only in a oral tradition, only in the memories of the performers of rituals. And because today we need documentation for everything, part of the research can go into documenting the material that comes from the memories of the Shrautis, that is the performers of these yajnas, that is not documented already in the text. Even that is available, and we don't know how much of that we have already lost. But still, I tell you that there are Shrautis, there are people who have preserved this in their memory. Even today, we can go document all this material from them. There is a great scope for research in that area also. So, with that, let me now move on to the expanding of the scope of ritual beyond the Vaidika tradition. In India, we have a huge population of India, what we call folk population. In the Shanaginan academic politics, people have used Aryan Dravidian as words for Vaidika and the folk. So to avoid that problematic words, Aryan and Dravidian, let me use the word folk for what does not come from the Vaidika. All the folk rituals that you see, for example, the mother goddess worship in villages, and all the rural rituals and all the rural traditions of, for example, what you call Shodasha Samskaras here. Vivaha, for example, marriage is one of those Shodasha Samskaras. You have a parallel of that in the folk tradition also. And the marriage rituals, the details of marriage rituals, they have their own caste based traditions, community based traditions, and tribe based traditions. And there is a mixture of Vaidika influence on this folk culture, and there are no Avaidika elements of these rituals. So if you go into the details of studying folk culture, there is a vast area of diversity and variegatedness of how many communities you can study and how many rituals of parallel to Shodasha Samskaras you can study, how many rituals at a family level you can study. These folk people have got their own deity altars, the mother goddess altars, or the deity, male deity altars in their own house, the gadye that they raise in their own house, and the ritual material that they have, and the amount of ritual detail that they have, like the Shrauta Shastra on the Vaidika side, it is also there. For example, it is most of the times it is preserved in their songs. These songs are usually in the form of epic narratives. But as part of the epic narrative, they include the details of how to perform the ritual and what is the spirit behind the ritual, what is the purpose of that ritual, and all that from a folk point of view. I have studied for the last 3 decades many such communities in the Telugu speaking states and the Kannada speaking state and the Marathi speaking states. For example, shepherds. I studied the rituals of the shepherds. If you see, Janani ji is going to talk about columns today. And these rituals, they use lots of columns. Through columns, they invoke the deities into the column drawing, the border drawing. And in some rituals, they invoke the deity into a mud sculpture that they raise. And you can use, for example, the Vaidika words like avahana and udvasana and all these to talk about what they do. And they're not opposed to use that also. For example, if they know that spirit possession that they get during this ritual is avahana that they are doing, and after the whole spirit possession is done, the how the spirit which is possessing the person is leaving, that can be called as udvasana. All these things can be done, and the folk rituals in India is a vast area where we can get into for academics of that, and there is a lot of scope for studying that. Youngsters can take up the study of that using Indic academic categories that are already laid down in the Vedika Shastras, and compare them and study these rituals from that point. Now, the third topic where I would like to go is the contribution of Indologists to the study of our Vedika rituals. Uh, Let me tell you that when we say contribution and the benefit that Indologists have done to the study of rituals, we don't mean that they have done anything more than already what has been done in the tradition in the granthas of Kalpa or Mimamsa or any other ritual related textual material in the tradition. We are not saying that they have done anything of that kind. We have to remember that for the Indologist, the audience are his own Western society audience. So what he is trying to do is he is trying to explain the rituals of a particular tradition to the other tradition. And in his case, if you look at the Indologist who indulges in the study of rituals, he is thinking that unlike his predecessors, who were studying only textual material like Vedic texts and words and meanings of those Vedic texts, and all the time interested in Indo-European linguistics or historical analysis of this material and all that, unlike those, I am doing a fieldwork based study. I am going into the actual performance of these rituals, and I am studying the ritual from the ground. I am looking at that from the ground reality. So he's enjoying that. And he is, for example, if you look at the publication by J.F. Stahl of a huge photograph based book called Agni, he did the Atiratra Yajna study from Kerala in a meticulous detail, and he documented photographically and included those photographs in that book. And he has done a lot of analysis of the ritual in its actual practical detail. You have many such Indologists like Histerman, David Knight, Fred Clothy, all of whom I know, and there are many, many other such Indologists who have done the study of Vedic rituals in meticulous detail. When the youngsters of this generation they read such material, there are two kinds of responses. One is that they get fascinated that these guys have done so much of study that which I do not know. It's obvious that you did not pay attention to all these details of these rituals. If, for example, if you go to United States and study Halloween festival or any other such rituals, carnivals that happen there, the way you pay meticulous attention to the details of those rituals uh, may not have been paid by the local Americans themselves. If you go to any other country also, outsiders have a greater curiosity than the natives. So the outsiders meticulousness of attention that he pays to the details of these rituals and all that naturally fascinates the locals, naturally fascinates the natives, that should not go to the extent of saying that they are the authority on this yajna. For example, no Keralite Shrauti would go to J.F. Stall to consult him how to perform Atiratra. That's not the way we deal with Indologists. Indologist was curious to study this particular yajna, and he documented it, and he documented it in a great detail. Is a different matter. But that does not mean that he all of a sudden turns into an authority about these rituals. His curiosity is satiated, and he could satiate the curiosity of his audience, and he was able to use, for example, the tools, academic tools that are provided by disciplines like cultural anthropology, where ritual becomes a very important component. So what he does is, for example, his experience is from the study of African tribal rituals, South American tribal rituals, and he makes ritual as a universal category, and he looks at all the rituals of the world as a universal category, and he evolves methodology, definitions, etc., of how to define a ritual, what is the purpose of a ritual. For example, there are theories like myth ritual relation. What is the relation between a mythical narrative, Pauranika narrative, Purana Katha, Purana Gadha, and the ritual that is performed? And there are many theories like ritual is an enactment of a myth. There are theories like rituals or imitations of natural happenings. And all those ideas that all are already there with him from the books of Taylor, Fraser, Boas, and all the early anthropologists up to the time of Victor Turner and Clifford Geertz. He, Larry Strauss is a structural anthropologist. He keeps in mind, and then when he comes to the Indian material, Vedic material, he thinks about that as lot of the worldwide rituals, and then goes into seeing what is different here, what is happening here, and he places the Vaidika ritual within that whole universal material and tries to interpret that from that perspective. That is useful. You can also do that. For example, you are given your education from the contemporary academics has made you a person looking at everything universally. You're not looking at everything from a purely native point of view, from your own perspective. You're also comparing your rituals to the rituals of Africans and South Americans and others. For that, a sophisticated academic methodology is provided by the study that you can see in the Indologist material. And what surprises most of these Indologists, I have heard from some of them who are sincere and positive towards Indian material, is that this self-conscious Vedic material, textual material that has already analyzed the rituals, they are very surprised about it. They told me on certain occasions that in India, if at all there is a scope for developing subjects out of the Vedic material, traditional material, one big subject that you can evolve is ritual studies. Ritual studies as a subject, as an academic discipline, can evolve only from India, because well before, centuries before, the contemporary cultural anthropologists dwelled into the ritual studies, people in India, in the Vaidika side, have done enormous amount of study, meticulous study of ritual. The way I have already explained to you, they have done that. So these Indologists have noticed that, and they say that out of that you can evolve ritual studies. The way we have already done linguistics from Panini's Ashtadhyayi, we have brought linguistics from Ayurveda, we have already done medicine, we have already done yoga. Yoga now it's a buzzword all over the world, but this ritual part we have not done. The Karmakanda study, the Kratu study, the Yajna study, from which there is so much of vocabulary, concepts, categories, methods of analysis, everything that has already been available, we are not used to develop our Vedic ritual studies, which can be part of Vedic anthropology. This There is a great scope. There is The world is waiting for this to happen, and some of you, the youngsters, can take this up as your life research and get into this area and develop ritual studies as a part of studying rituals all over the world. Let me tell you that ritual studies does not only belong to religion. There are secular rituals also. For example, flag hoisting is a secular ritual, and there are many formalities in corporate world during corporate life which can be called secular rituals. So if you evolve ritual studies as a field, ritual studies as an academic field, that will be useful for that kind of study also, that kind of study of secular rituals also. And for that also, you already have material that is available in shastras like Shrauta Sutras, Kalpa, Mimamsa, and all that. So, ritual studies that can come from the Vedic tradition is going to be useful not only for the religious side or the spiritual side, it is going to be useful for the study of human life itself in a very broad sense, including corporate life. So, with this emphasizing of scope for Vedic academics about Vedic rituals and folk rituals and tribal rituals of India, I would just like to tell you that with all these ideas that we wanted to start the seminar series on rituals, this is uh, the first of those seminars. It would have been a 2 day seminar, but today it's a very good response. We have got around 20 panelists now, uh, and we are going to have the seminar up to around 6 o'clock in the evening. And in the evening, we are going to have presentations from abroad. Uh, and the valedictory talk is also going to be from abroad. And many interesting, very good papers are going to come up. And I welcome all the panelists who have come up with very interesting papers on diverse topics of Indian Vedic and Hindu rituals. With that, welcoming all the panelists, I take leave.